Hi, everyone, and welcome to AB Conversations, where we will help you CFP your way out of it. A podcast where you get into the minds of a couple certified financial planners on how we think and feel about everyday financial planning questions and what should really matter most to you. A healthier financial life starts now. Hey, Adam, how are we doing today?
Just fantastic. How are you?
Excellent. Love to hear it. I'm good. I'm ready for this. I love this topic. It's probably the most, well, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say the most rewarding part of our work. It's definitely one of them. So let's not leave people in suspense. I think we are probably most frequently, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but we're probably most frequently found around retirement. You know, when people start to feel the weight of that kind of decision, and we often say there's a lot of moving parts to that. And I think one of the hardest things for us to try to convince people of is that it doesn't have to feel like you're just flipping a switch. So I'd like to just talk about retirement today as a transition period and how we can, I think, do really meaningful work for people, not just with some of the financial numbers, but in helping them actually like psychologically get to a good spot with what retirement can mean. And again, within the framework of this is a transition period in your life. It's not a circled date on a calendar.
Yeah, and I think that maybe part of that misconception, or just part of that, circle the date on the calendar, is just that's the way it used to be, right? You worked at the same company for 35 years, 40 years, whatever that is, and then you retired, you got your pension, you collected Social Security, and you just lived the rest of your life. And I think just the cultural shifts, or just the shifts in our world, in our country, it doesn't have to be that way, right? We certainly see it. Not everyone works at the same job for 50 plus years. There is transitions throughout their working life. So getting to retirement does not have to be that, all right, here's the spot, I'm going to hit it, and now I got retirement ahead of me, now what? It really can be, and we certainly see it more with our clients more and more now. It really is that transition into retirement, whether it's working part-time, consulting, whatever that is. There can be a temporary plan essentially to get to what they want to get to.
Yeah, so I guess that's what I want to talk about today. That temporary plan to me is, I don't know, a sweet spot of you're maybe 2 to 4 years to retirement, or maybe, again, let's stay in COVID conversation here. Maybe working from home just doesn't work for you, or maybe you're in a job, but health has changed. You physically can't do your work anymore. And now there's like panic that if I can't work, am I going to be okay?
Yeah.
I think I want to talk about today, what are some of those check boxes that we would want to go through with people to say, you're going to be okay. And by the way, here are the things that you don't have to have an answer on. It's okay not to know, right? So I'll start first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said it. The ability to work part-time or to engage in meaningful work outside of what has been maybe your career or everything else that you've had going on is absolutely something we're seeing more of, right? Working part-time, consulting. I think being able to pair that up with some sort of other decision around income, whether that's Social Security or, what do you have in savings? I would say, let's take stock of how you're going to recreate a paycheck. And if it's not the full-time work, let's figure out those gaps so that you can fill them or know how you would be able to fill them through some sort of other earned income.
Yeah. And maybe, again, we certainly see it. It could be, just to throw out an example, let's say if the target for retirement was 65, but they had that in their mind of that 65 is just the date because I know I got to make it to Medicare, and then I can start collecting Social Security. And it's just that date because that's a round number essentially in life, but they would retire sooner if they could. Maybe it's even just giving that context or that perspective of, you could retire a year or two or whatever earlier, but then here's what the trade-offs would be. Here's another way, or here are a few variables that you can plug into this that can support potentially an earlier retirement. And it's just, we don't view it that way.
Right. And that's where I think it's really important for us to articulate this as kind of like not an independent decision. let's figure, that's one of the big check boxes. Let's figure out how you're going to cover healthcare, especially if you're not
Yeah.
65. But
Yeah.
right, if you have a spouse and you're of different ages and one's going to maybe transition into retirement before the other, can we easily solve this problem by just using somebody else's benefits? Does your
Hmm.
employer have its own retiree benefit plan? How would you bridge the gap to 65? If you want to work part-time and you can't get healthcare, then let's stack on top of that, what is that expected expense? Part of this transition period is figuring out the answers to the things that may be daunting to you.
Yeah.
But if we can help you do that research and try to put this puzzle together, maybe it gives you more confidence to make that move sooner.
Yeah. So I think clearly we view retirement, there are many variables or many different options to solve that, or to at least give that, moving forward, that they're going to be okay. And I think that's ultimately the biggest risk, or I think the biggest hurdle to making that decision on retirement. It's, am I going to be okay? Are my assets going to support me for the rest of my life? I don't know how long that's going to be. Therefore, if I just continue to work, I'm not going to hurt my situation from that aspect.
Yeah, and maybe we should use those words. Retirement in itself kind of feels like something permanent.
Hmm.
We've, I guess, in certain contexts, we want to refer to it as making work optional, right? Having some financial freedom to feel like, all right, I don't need to go and do this job anymore.
Yeah.
But I really do want you to think about how many people that we have led through the process of getting to retirement that 6 months later, or in our next quarterly meeting, we're like, hey, by the way, I picked up this consulting gig and I really love it. Like, sitting
Yeah.
still is not something I think that people, at least in our experience, kind of aspire to.
Right.
And figuring out what comes next or how they're going to, meaningfully fill their day. What am I going to do all day? Um, it's okay to let that kind of breathe and figure out how that's going to happen if some of this financial stuff that we can take care of on the front with you kind of gets checked off the list.
Yeah, I think that's the key point you made right there, of making sure that they are okay from a financial standpoint. Because, as you said, we certainly have clients that share with us after they retired that they've picked up, the consulting job or part-time job just to keep themselves busy in a thing that they actually like. Right? It's almost like a hobby, but they're getting paid along the way. But we also
Yeah.
see the flip side of that. That is, they're volunteering within their community. There may not be the monetary reward, but it fills a lot of that sense of community or that sense of purpose that they may lose when they leave their career or they leave their job. So even just filling that portion of it
Yeah.
is important.
Yeah. And again, maybe that's not as part of our job description, what we're supposed to be doing for people, but we've gotten a lot of people to this stage. We've seen what works for certain people and not. And that's not to say that one size fits all, but it is absolutely common for people to have a sense, I would say, of anxiety going into retirement because they say, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself.
Yeah.
So helping them identify what were the parts of the jobs that you really found rewarding, and then let's find a way to have that be a part of your life. That's something we want to help people do too. We can connect people with each other even from that standpoint. Find a mentor, have somebody that's gone through the process, be able to help you get through some of those tough conversations and anxious moments.
We're viewing retirement as that transitionary period, but then also even just trying to figure out what you may want out of retirement. You don't have to have that answer in a day or in a weekend. You have said before, it's very easy for people to know what they're going to do on day 10, and maybe that's just, wake up, have a cup of coffee and do nothing. But day 1000 in retirement, who knows? I don't know what's going to change between now and then, and that's okay. I guess is the point that we want to get across, is that you don't have to have the answer. Just like we're viewing this retirement as a potential transition, figuring out what you want out of retirement may go through several stages of evolution until you
Yeah.
figure out what actually fits for you and your situation.
So I think we see the transition into retirement being most successful when people do. I mean, if they really do have a year or two before they retire, we like the idea of test driving that retirement, right? This is the
Yeah.
time to really log all your expenses and really be sure that we understand what are my needs, what are my wants, what am I setting aside for uncertainty? And then if you've got some legacy goals, let's build that in. So I think it's really important to use that time to like figure out how we're recreating those paychecks, and is it going to work
Mhm.
before you flip the switch, right? That's the data I think we can give.
Yeah, and that's the part of it that it's the innate feeling of, am I going to be okay, and not really knowing the answer to that in retirement. Um, and you just saying, like, test driving it beforehand can give you a pretty good simulation. Now maybe
Yeah.
it's clearly not the day to day. If you're still going to work, it's hard to simulate retirement, but from an expense and income standpoint, test driving that to know when I retire, if it is a point in time, or if it is a transition, to know that I can
Yeah.
cover these expenses and not have to worry about that. We can give all the data in the world that says, hey, your plan is showing 100% probability of success. You don't have to worry about it. You could retire yesterday. And we've seen that still doesn't necessarily translate to the feeling of, oh, I can go do this, from the client perspective. So, data
Right.
does not always
Right.
equal feelings. So
Yeah.
being able to get a feel for that, I think you said it very well. Being able to test drive that process can help add to going through that transition into that next phase.
Yeah. So start now. And even there, if there is some sort of gap that would need to be filled, we want to know that now, because while you do have maybe less of a runway 2 to 4 years out, then maybe it's a conversation of, well, where are we saving it? How are we doing that differently? We need to start
Hmm.
transitioning a portfolio to be ready for income a couple of years out too. So I think
Yeah.
there's a good checklist here of, let's figure out what your holdups would be. Let's figure out if part-time work or consulting is something that you like to build in with the buffer. Let's look at the cash reserve. Let's understand expenses. Let's figure out the healthcare part, right? And if we
Hmm.
can check a lot of those boxes, well, then let's mentally and emotionally start to prepare ourselves too, because I think that's where somebody can go from having, as you said, um, a great written financial plan to, I still don't know if I'm comfortable with it. We need to work on that, right? So I really do like this idea of people can transition into retirement. It doesn't need to be a flip of a switch.
Yeah. So I think maybe to put a bow on it, it really is all of those variables that we kind of talked about, the different scenarios that can get paired together, going through those, helping prioritize, right? Because certain variables are going to be less important or more important depending on someone's perspective. Prioritizing those,
Yep.
seeing what fits together to build that plan that feels appropriate, or at least feels like a fit. And yeah, let's test drive it.
Well said. Thank you for the insights once again. Here, Sarah. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on this podcast again soon.
You got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Hey everyone, Adam and I really appreciate you tuning in. Please note that the opinions we voiced in the show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be most appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, your accountant, and financial advisor or tax advisor prior to making any decisions or investing. Thanks for listening.